Welcome back to the channel, guys. So today this would be the very first video for the Python tutorials playlist on this channel. And today's topic, which we are going to explain in this video, would be variables and data types. So even though if you are new to programming or to even general programming or even Python as a language, so today's video is one of the most important ones that you guys need to see because variables and data types would be the foundation of everything else you would write in Python, from making simple applications or games to even very complete AI systems. So generally, what is a variable? So you could think it of as a container, a box in which you would store your things, and outside the box there would be a name that you would assign to that variable. And after storing the specific information in that variable, it could be anything. It could be used to store your name, your age, or a score in a game, or a piece of shopping cart, or any prices that you assign to a specific item on a website. So you guys need to get familiar with variables and what type of variables we do have in Python and what data types Python generally serves as a programming language. So now moving on, I would start off with the simplest program in Python. Let me create the folder. So for Python, you guys need to know that you need to make your files with the extension of .py because that is what would tell the IDE and compiler that which programming language are you using, and it would load the necessary extensions for it which you have installed in your relevant IDE. So generally our So for comments in Python, you use this hashtag symbol on your PC or laptop, and this is used to add comments in Python. And comments are really important, not while learning, but to write code that, uh, because if somebody else reads your code, uh, he needs to know what exactly your code is doing. If he generally not gets an idea, or if he's new to programming or new to that language, and cases like that. So our first comment would be uh, introductory program to Python. Yeah, so now let me show you guys two things. Like our basic program in many languages would be a simple hello world program. For example, you guys should know that in extensions such in languages such as C++ or Java, it's really complex to write this program because you need, as a beginner specifically speaking, because you need to declare a variable, you need to store that message in it, and then you need to create a main function, and then you need to print out that specific statement if you want to do so. But for Python, it's really easy. There's a built-in function called print. You could pass now what? Let me comment it out for you guys. So basically, what the print function is generally in Python, that it accepts a it would generally accept a variable or a direct string input, and not even if a string input, any other data types input, and print on screen. So there are two methods to do so. I would show you guys two ways to print hello world on your screen. One using by storing it in a variable called message, and then the other one would be to directly print it using the print function. So to create a variable in Python, what you guys need to do is that you need to name your variable. For example, I have my variable name as message, and you put the equal to sign and assign what you need to store in this variable. So for Python, you do not need to declare the type of the variable, either it be an integer, a float, a string, as in other programming languages. It is auto-detected by the language itself that what kind of variable you are creating after you assign a data to it. So for example, if I write 5 over here, so the compiler and language would automatically detect that this variable should be of type integer rather than of type string. And if I declare a string, for example, hello world, so now it will automatically assign this variable to be of type string rather than of type integer. And you could also change data in a single variable, a previously assigned data to a variable, which I'll show you guys on later. So for example, I have created this variable message, and now I have stored this data in it, which is hello world. So now I could print out this variable, this data that it is holding, by passing the variable's name to the print function. So when I pass the variable's name to the print function, and now when I run my program, you guys should see that it has printed out on the screen the data stored in our variable, which was hello world. So that is how you generally declare a variable in Python, and then alongside you print out what the data is in this following variable. And another way to print out this message directly would be to use to print out the text itself, as I told you guys earlier. So I could write the print function as in general and then pass my data directly rather than declaring it in a variable. Yeah, so you guys should see this on my screen that it has again printed out hello world directly when I passed it onto this print when I passed it into this print function. So, but this practice is not considered as good because this generally works for small data. I should even comment this out that generally for small data you could not use it for big data. For example, if you have input of users names, email addresses, so you would generally like it to store it in different variables rather than directly printing it out on the screen. That would cause a lot of data in a single line or multiple lines, increasing the chances of error in your following code and making it really difficult to debug for yourself. So now moving on, you guys, now there are multiple data types in Python. Yeah, so now like starting off with our data type, our first data type that I would be introducing to you guys would be the string data type. So now string data type. So for strings, you guys need to know that strings are generally any kind of text, or it could be any kind of combination of text and numbers which you would store in a variable. And now for strings, you could perform multiple operations on string too. For example, I have this message variable that is storing this specific string in it. So you guys need to know that this variable should be of type string then. And to declare a string, uh, we generally use these double quotes to declare a string. And we can also perform multiple operations on the string data type. So now for the string data type, the first operation that I'm going to show you guys is generally changing the case of a specific text that you have stored in a variable. So for example, if I have a name called John and it has all lowercase letters, but generally names are nouns, so the first letter should be capital. So we use the dot title function built in string that uh, capitalizes the first letter and converts and would convert this lowercase John to John with the uppercase J. So that is how this would work for this case. So I could show you guys how you would do it. So let me comment this. Uh, So, so what we could do is that we could create a variable called name, and now inside this variable, I would store a name, and I would name it as John Headway. And as you guys can see now, there is a space between John and Headway. So as there is a space between John and Headway, so this dot title function would now convert both the letters of both the initials of John and Headway to uppercase. And if there would be no space in between John and Headway, then it would consider John Headway as a single word and only change the case for the letter J from lowercase to uppercase. And now to use the dot title function, I would call this function in our print function. I would write print and then write the name of the variable which I need to print out, that is holding our specific data, which is name. And then by using a dot, I could use this function called dot title and then put these two brackets, round brackets in front of it, because this dot title is a function which takes an input which you have given it, that is the name, and then it would convert this relevant name's initials to uppercase. So now when I print this out, it should print this name in the correct way. So now upon running the program, you guys can see that our name is converted to uppercase letters with the initials being uppercase. So this would be the first function that you guys should know while dealing with strings in Python. And now I would show you guys another function through which we could convert the whole data in a string to uppercase or either lowercase. So I'll create a new variable and I'll show you guys these two new functions using lower and upper on strings. So the functions which we would be generally using for this case would be upper and lower. These are the two built-in functions in Python. These perform the following operations on strings. That the function upper, uh, this thing converts all letters to uppercase, and this lower function, this would convert all letters to lowercase in Python. So I would again make two new variables and show you guys how you could use these functions. So let me create a new variable for to test the uppercase function. So I could again create a new name and I would name it as name2, and inside this name2 I could name a country that could be for example Pakistan. And now inside, and now to convert all the letters of this string Pakistan to uppercase, what I would need to do is that I would need to pass uh, the print function the name of the variable as we did earlier for the dot title function, and then using this dot. Yeah, so now what we would do is that now using this dot, I would after writing the dot, I would use upper and I would pass this in the print function. So now what this should return us is Pakistan in all capital letters. So let's see how it runs. I need to comment this out. Yes, so you guys can see that our word has been converted to all uppercase letters for this specific dot upper function. And now we could test the same uh, with the lower function. So now let us create a new variable. I could name it as name3, and we could call it as COD. And now to use the lowercase function, which is the lower function, what this would do is that it would convert all the letters of COD to lowercase. So to test this, we could again call the print function. We would pass it the variable's name that we need to print, and then use the dot uh, to assign what operation needs to be performed on this specific variable, which would be the lower function which we need to use on this variable. And now what you guys could see is that this should print out COD in all lower letters. So this completely works. You guys can see as the output on our screen. Yes, so now moving on to strings, uh, you should also have the idea to generally know that what are even f strings in Python. Yes, so now for f strings, what you guys need to know is that there would be some situations in which you would generally want to use a variable's value inside a string. So for example, you might need to have two variables, one representing the first name of a person and the other could represent the last name of the person. And then you would need to combine those two variables together and display it in a third variable which would be called full name, for example. So to insert a variable's value into a string, you would just uh, place the letter F immediately before opening the quotation mark. And then what you would do is that you would then put braces around the names or name of the variable you want to use inside the string. And then if Python would itself then replace each variable within its value when the string is displayed on the screen. So I could make you guys test how you guys do it. So let me comment this out. I'm going to show you guys how to use f strings in Python. So these are some small things you guys need to get very familiar with, because when you would be learning about list and tuples ahead, so many of these functions would be really useful while learning, and even you guys need to have a good grasp on these fundamentals. So we could create a variable called first name, and I could name it as Ada, and we could create a variable as last name, and we would name it as uh, Ada Woods. Yeah, so it should be Woods in this case. So now what we need to do is that we need to now create a variable full name, and what we need to do is that we need that full name should combine these two variables to have this data Ada Woods in a single variable. So we would be creating a new variable called full name, and now inside this variable, as I guys told you that to use f strings you need to place an f before the quotation mark of the strings, and then use these curly braces. And now inside these curly braces, what you guys need to do is that you need to pass on your variables that you have created as first name in this case, and then with the space the last name. As we have created two variables, that is why I have used two curly braces inside the quotation mark. But if you want a single variable to be stored in the full name, then you would generally use a single pair of curly braces. But that would generally not be used if you are using f strings in this case. So now what this does is that this combines first name and last name. Generally what you call it as string concatenation, as in other programming languages in C++ too. So now what we are going to do is that we would simply print the full name, and it would have the complete name of the given uh, of the complete name with what we have stored, which is ADA words in this case. So now let's run our program. So yeah, as you guys can see, it has printed out the complete full name, which is ADA words in this case. So now moving on, as I have showed you guys this f strings, like what they are and how you use it. You could also use the built-in functions which we have discussed, for example, the title function, the upper function, and the lower function in f strings too. So what we could now do is that we could also pass a message in the print function directly and then print the full name uh, with all the initials in capital. So if I convert the initials to small letters, what we could now do is that I would write a comment here that using functions in f strings. So I would again pass the print function, and now inside this print function we could pass a message to the user. We would use an f string, and now inside the quotation marks I could first write a message called hello. And now after this message hello, what we could use is that we would uh, pass the full name of the uh, we would pass the full name and then use the title function to convert the initials to uppercase, so that user gets a message that would be hello Ada words in this case. So to pass, but as we are passing two arguments over here, one which is a direct string input and the other is a variable, we need to separate this using a comma, so that the print function knows that you are passing two variables which are separated. And now over here inside the quotation marks, we would use the curly braces because we are going to pass a variable that we have already created. And I would pass the variable's name, which is full name in this case, then use the title function, which would convert the initials to uppercase, and then we could pass an exclamation mark at the end too. So this should print the full name with the hello message before it. Yeah, so you guys can see that how nicely it has done this. That now it prints hello at our words and with an exclamation mark at the end of the sentence. So now moving on, what we could do is that we could now so now there could be many errors which you guys could encounter with strings too. For example, using double quotation at the start and using a single quotation at the end. You should avoid such errors. Uh, Even though it is very rare that now when you enter double quotes, it automatically enters a double quotes at the end too, so that you guys have another so that you guys have a complete pair of double quotes for a string. So now this would be our first program for introduction to Python, and I think this is enough for the string class today. And now I would show you guys what generally are numbers in Python. So for numbers in Python, you guys need to get familiar with this too. So I could name it as numbers and arithmetic operations in Python, just as in any other programming language. So for numbers, you guys need to know that numbers are often used in programming. For example, if a user is playing a game, you need to keep the score. You need to store the score of each of the players. So, or you could need to represent some data in visualizations, or you could even use to store numbers could also be used to store information in web applications, and so on. And what you guys and for Python treats numbers in several different ways, depending on how they would be used. So I would generally start off with integers first because they are really simple and very easy to work with. So for integers, let me comment this out that we would start it off with integers. So for integers, what you guys need to know that you could perform addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division with integers in Python. So an integer, again, as we have now studied with variables, you could store the integer in a variable itself. For example, we have created a variable called called var and stored 5 in it. Or you could just simply write 5, and this would also be a valid integer in this case. So what you guys now need to know that I would now uh, performing addition, uh, subtraction, multiplication, and division on integers. So couple of examples would be, for example, we could simply in the print function we could do 5 plus 2, and this should print out 7 on our screen, which would be this in this case. And we could do the same with with subtraction. If we enter 5 minus 2, this should print out 3 in this case, which is displaying on our screen. And we could again do this with multiplication, which would result in 10 in this case. And we could do this with division, which would give us a float output, but to keep this in integers I could do 10 divided by 2, which would give us 5 in this case, 5.0. Yeah. So this would be how you would do it directly without declaring a variable in Python. And to use it using a variable, what you guys could do is that you guys could, just a minute, I should comment this whole block out. Yeah, so you could also do this you by creating multiple variables in Python too. For example, if we create a variable called a and we assign it a value 5, and we create a variable called b and we assign it the value 4, and now if we create a third variable, by the way, before creating the third variable we could simply call the print function and print a plus b. We could pass these variables directly, and it would result in the sum of the two variables, which is 9 in this case. Or what we could do is that we could create a third variable called c, which would first of all store the sum of a and b, and then we could pass this variable c to our print function, which would again result in the same output as we passed directly those two variables. So you could do the same for addition, you could do the same for subtraction, and you could do the same for multiplication and division too. So now what you guys need to be familiar with is that, as you all know, that in the other programming languages, to denote something to be raised to a power, for example 2 raised to the power 4, we would use this sign for to tell the compiler that we are raising our data to a specific power. But for Python, what we use is that, as for multiplication, we use a single asterisk. For power computation, we use a double asterisk to denote a square of a number. And to denote a cube of a number, you would use 3 asterisks. And as for as many as the number of powers are, the number of asterisks becomes as it is. But a single asterisk would still denote multiplication in Python and in other programming languages too. So what we could do is that we could print out 3 raised to the power 2, which would be 9 in this case. Yeah, so it gave us the output of 9, which is exactly true in this case. And we could do this with we could do this with multiple different integers too. For example, we could also print 3 raised to the power of 3. That would give 7 in this case. And then what we could do is that we could also perform it with different numbers. For example, what would be 10 to the power 6? It should be million, I guess. So we could call in the print function 10 to the power 6. Yeah, so you guys can see. Yeah, so uh, the parentheses are also really very important in Python when performing arithmetic operations specifically, because if you write in your console that you write 2 plus 3, which would be 5, and then you write multiplied with 4, which you expect that it should give you 20 in this case, because 5 multiplied by 4 is 20. But this would not be the case. It would first of all perform multiplication as with the mathematics rule, which would be 12 in this case, and then add 2 to the following result, which would be 14, as you guys can see. So to correctly tell which operation to perform first, what you need to do is that you need to declare your parenthesis. You need to tell that the sum of 2 and 3, which would be 5, should be multiplied with 4. Now it would result in 20 in this case. Yeah, so moving on, there are multiple data types, as integers is not a single data type in Python. You also have float data type. So float generally refers to decimals. For example, 0.1, 0.001, and etc. And you could perform the same arithmetic operations on float too. For example, if we print 0.1 plus 0.1, this should print out 0.2 as in this case. And if we print 0.2 multiplied by 0.3, which should be 0.6, 0.06, as in this case. So you could do the same operations for any other data type in Python. Uh, so and like you could assign multiple values to in a single line. For example, rather than writing a and then assigning a variable, for example 43, and then using b and assigning a variable 23, and then c and assigning a variable which would be the sum of both of them, which would be 56, 66 in this case. You could do multiple assignments in a single line too. For example, x, you could write your variables which you want to declare in a single line separated by a comma, for example x, y, and z, and you could assign multiple and then you could assign multiple data for these variables, For example, I want to assign 10 for x and 11 for y and 12 for z. And then you could also print uh, all of these variables. For example, if I use print x and then I call print y and then I call print z. So our assignment worked perfectly in a single line. So now I think that probably this should be the end of this first topic which I wanted to discuss in today's video, which I think so is a good comprehensive wrap up of variables and data types in Python. So for the next video, I'm thinking about creating it on lists, a le- uh, and it would be a good lengthy video, and it would cover all operations from the basics of list, why do we need them in Python, to applications of it, and then using the functions that we have learned today and many other functions that we would be learning in further videos regarding Python and its data types. So this would be it for this video. So do like, share and subscribe the channel.